Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us for Utahns Against Hunger's issue forum focusing on outreach in food resources and benefit programs. Uh, I am Neil Rickard. I'll be your moderator for today. I'm the child nutrition advocate here at Utahns Against Hunger. And let me get started by introducing our panelists. Start with Dominique.
Hi, Neil. Thank you for having me. I'm excited to participate in the forum. My name is Dominique Byrd, and I'm the development coordinator at Comunidades Unidas, or in English, Communities United. We're a local nonprofit based out of West Valley, Utah. We've been serving the Valley for 25 years, and we specifically focus on bringing services and community organizing opportunities to the Latinx and immigrant community here.
Great. And toss it over to Michelle.
Hi, my name is Michelle. I work here in Community Action Service and Food Bank in Provo. My title is Outreach and Enrollment Specialist. So I do the food stamps here. I go out in the community and attend meetings and help clients apply for food stamps.
Great. Well, thanks again for joining us today. So getting started, why don't we start very broadly? And so what are some of the difficulties that you guys have experienced, that you guys are aware of when it comes to making initial contact with people, people who could benefit from either resources or services in the community? Feel free to just jump in whenever.
I can go ahead and start us off. So typically when we're out doing outreach, whether that's an in-person event or over the phone through people that have called in that we have as leads in our database, the very first contact to get them interested isn't the hardest part. It is more that initial phone call where we're trying to reach them and connect them. So here at Comunidades Unidas, we do SNAP enrollment, and we also ran a food distribution program for 4 years. Unfortunately, at the beginning of this year, we had to close that program, but it was really well utilized. So a lot of things that have been brought up is clients don't answer the phone because they don't recognize the number. So we have a lot of trouble making that very, they'll come up to us in person, we'll say, we have these services, we'll give you a call to set up an appointment, and then not answering and not calling back because they don't recognize the number.
So I think just building off of that, one of the things that I'm hearing is that there's just a degree to outreach even before we're talking about the programs themselves, just in terms of the infrastructure for doing outreach that's more difficult than people anticipate. And I wonder if you guys could expand on that.
Well, I don't know if that's the same with Dominique, but for me is the requirements of the for the food stamps, the requirements, the process, the qualification, all that stuff, which I do briefly explain it to them, which they do appreciate, but it's a little hesitant as well, because that's what I'm getting a lot. We do get a lot of Latinos, and I do speak Spanish, so I explain it to them, and then they look at me and they're like, oh, okay, kind of like a little hesitant at first, which I don't blame them. But that's what I'm getting when I'm going over with them with the food stamps. Or sometimes they get confused what it means, because when you say SNAP, they think it's pills, like supplemental pills. So that's what another confusion that I get. So I'm here explaining to them what food stamps are, given the brief little history of what that is. And they're like, oh, or because we're a food bank, they think we're getting, to get food, you have to sign up in our computer, and they think SNAP is food. So that's one of the confusions we've had as well here at Community Actions.
I know speaking on my end, like part of our job is just sort of cataloging the resources that are available to someone. And if you get started on that pretty soon, you're like, okay, well, we got SNAP, and we got WIC, or you can also go to this food bank, or you could participate in food. And suddenly you've got 10 or 12 different options for people who may or may not fit. I'm not muted at all. Um, um, so speaking to the language barrier a bit, I know it's a major issue here in Utah, and I think clearly both of you guys work with it on a regular basis. Um, Many people may realize, but may not realize that there are just definite differences in the degrees of food insecurity based on communities, and Latino residents, especially in Utah County and Salt Lake County, are much more likely to experience food insecurity as a whole. So, like, how do you find that that shows up? Is it just like stuff like, well, okay, you guys don't know this program by the same terms that we do, and we have to go through that translation process, or are there more pervasive ways that the language barrier shows up?
So I can start us off with that. So since we are dedicated to serving the Latino and immigrant community here, all of our staff is Spanish speaking. So we have the resources available to connect with people and be able to speak in terms that are linguistically appropriate as well as culturally appropriate. That's something that we've had to overcome as an organization, is there's certain cultural concepts or words that might exist, like SNAP, for example, and how do we communicate that in a way that's not just initials of a government program. Um, I think another way that the language barrier, I don't know if I'd call it a language barrier, but more of a lived experience barrier that shows up for us at least, is when we're working with immigrant populations. There's a lot of fear around public charge. So we have to do a lot of education about that, and we have to explain to people what services they can access and not have to worry about being deemed a public charge, and what services they should not access because of the effects it will have on their immigration process. And that's where we see a lot of hesitancy from our clients, is not wanting to take part in government benefits because that's a fear. And that was a Trump presidency, a Trump administration, the new rules for public charge. But there's still a lot of fear in our community that exists around that. And then on top of that, as Michelle mentioned, the requirements they're quite hefty. So having to explain that to someone, we really focus on using plain language, and also in kind of keeping an attitude of not hopelessness, of trying to reassure them that it is a long process, but this can be really beneficial to your family, especially the WIC program. So we try to keep that at the forefront. But yeah, the language barrier can be difficult. I feel fortunate that we have the capacity to assist our Spanish speaking clients in a really comprehensive way. We're actually one of the only organizations, as far as I've been told, that we do the entire process in Spanish. So there's no point where we're like, okay, we can guide you up to here, and then you got to switch into English for this part. So we've really tried to meet people where they are and make it as comfortable as possible.
Yeah, that's kind of like how we do that here in Community Action as well. Even though we serve all types of population, not just Latinos, but yeah, the majority that come into my office, or when I'm out in the community, is definitely going to be the Latino population. Once in a while, I do get people from Africa. I'm lucky enough to get some of them who understand Spanish, especially if they speak Portuguese. So I do have that little bit of a language barrier sometimes. From what I understand, they like, I can understand you pretty well because you speak very clearly, which is awesome. But then I do have other like students with a student visa who come from a whole different like country, where they're like, I can still understand you even if your English is not great. So yeah, it takes time to communicate with them. I had one client who I just did it all over translation on the phone. So that is awesome. It's just being patient with them, which I do have. But yeah, when it comes with immigration, the requirements, yes, I do have to explain to them in a very I think you said it very well, Dominique, in a sincere way, really, because that is a little hesitant when it comes with that. I actually had a call Utah Against Hunger because I had a student visa. I'm like, I don't know if you're qualified because I don't know if that's for requirements. So apparently it just varies really. And that's kind of what I have to say. Even if they don't qualify, I just say, please still come to our food bank. We don't require anything at all, maybe ID, but other than that, that's all we are asking for. So we still have that little bit of hope for them. You know, everyone is welcome to come to our food bank.
And
I
going
oh,
off
sorry.
of that, oh, sorry. Going off of that, that was something that when we had our food distribution program, and now we kind of do them on an emergency basis. We are providing food, but we used to have bi-monthly distributions that, you know, we were serving over 400 families. It was really such a great tool to use when someone was denied SNAP benefits, that we could send them over to our food distribution program. So we know that they could still get those immediate needs met, because unfortunately, you know, there's nothing we can do when we get someone that's not qualified back, except for try and renew, recertify when their qualifications might align better.
Right.
I think the picture you guys are starting to paint with the experiences helping people out in these situations is one where you've got maybe you got to like navigate language barriers. Maybe you've gone through already a bunch of programs just to get to this point where you're seeking food with all the different requirements. And one of the things that I experience talking to people is a real loss of trust in institutions. Like there's like another hurdle that starts to be created that just, oh, I don't believe that any of this is going to work out. And I wonder if you guys can speak to that in your experiences working with people and some of the things that you find personally helpful in these circumstances.
I've had a mom come in. She didn't have the right paperwork. However, I always ask about the children. Were the kids born here? And I will get yes or no. So I did have a mom who was in my office, little ones, and they were born here. And she's like, I don't think I qualify. It's like, no, your kids qualify. All we're going to have to do is put your kid's name. They might ask for birth certificate or social security for those kids, but they're only going to look at your income. That is it. They're not going to ask you for that. So at first it was a little hesitant for her, but then once I kind of explained the whole situation, she kind of like felt a little bit comfortable after that. I think that's just the one experience I've had when it comes with like parents undocumented or parents don't have the right paperwork, but their children do qualify. So I've had a couple times where I had to sign up with the kids.
I think, yeah, our community especially struggles with trusting institutions in the first place, but then that loss of trust is especially prevalent when they get back a denial. I have two stories. One, our SNAP enrollment specialist, she shared this story with me before the forum, that you know, she's helping an elderly person apply. They are on $1,100 a month of fixed income Social Security, and they go through the whole application process, which can be a bit invasive, you know, asking about all your assets and your properties and every cent you have in your name and where you put your money. And then that person ended up getting approved for $26 for the month. So after something like that, our community really tends to lose that trust. They don't feel like there is no help for them, and that how do you work your whole life, you start to draw your Social Security, you look to apply for some sort of supplemental assistance in addition to your Social Security, and both of those institutions are kind of coming up short. And it's incredibly difficult to recuperate that trust. In fact, we still struggle with that to a large degree, especially after those really, you know, you get only a few dollars back. And even yesterday, I was doing outreach at a different food bank, connecting community members with the other resources we have. And I was giving out our SNAP flyers that we do SNAP enrollment. The guy next to me is just like, I don't even bother anymore. I got approved for $36 last time I tried, and that's why I'm here at this food bank today. And it's one of those difficult times when you can when you don't have much to say, you know,
Mhm.
I'm really sorry that you're going through that and that was your experience. And that's why I know we continue advocating for more just systems. But
Mhm.
yeah, another thing is hard is when we have mixed status families here. And a mother might have 5 kids, but if only 2 or 3 of them are citizens, they only get benefits for those 2 or 3 children. And that
Mhm.
also that feels very unjust to know that, okay,
Right.
so this government or this country values 2 or 3 of my children, but not
Mhm.
all 5 of them. The well-being of all 5 of them doesn't matter.
Mhm.
So that's where we especially struggle. And then the questioning, my coworker shared another story where her husband passed away and relatives, it's a cultural custom, but relatives outside of the country had sent money to help pay for funeral expenses and to kind of get her through this difficult time as she became a widow. And it was when she went to recertify for SNAP, it was like, well, where did this money come from? And you know, it's really hard because that is seen as an additional income when in fact that was
Right.
to get her through probably the most difficult time in her life. So
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, even when it comes to like the difficulties of procedure or like potential like pitfalls, like you were talking about public charge, like the height of that being an issue is 4 to 8 years ago, but it's still very much a concern for people. And people have long memories for bad stuff like that. It's definitely understandable. You guys have both been talking about mixed families, about mothers seeking resources, and I think that's an opportunity to transition to talk about like family life and the ease or difficulty of receiving benefits. Like we were just talking about mixed status families. So okay, even if the parents don't necessarily qualify, or some members don't qualify based on their legal status, kids likely do. Just like kids are likely going to qualify for WIC or school meals. So like in that one sense, there are benefits like available, but there are also like practical difficulties in applying for food for benefits or going to get resources from a food bank if you've got a family. And I wonder if you guys could share some thoughts about that.
I think in my experience, I don't know much. I'm still learning more about food stamps. I feel like food stamps are a little bit more difficult than any other program out there. I mean, yeah, anyone can qualify for WIC, anyone can qualify for Medicaid, especially for kids. Like even if they're undocumented, children they can apply for Medicaid for their kids. And it makes me think like if they can do that, why can they do that for food stamps? Maybe the parents may not qualify for it, but children, I think I just was in a meeting today talking about how there's a lot of family of low income here in Utah County, specifically in like Provo School District, Nebo, and things like that, that they're going through a food insecurity. They rely so much of just going to school to get food, but that's still not enough. Even if there's in part of the school meal plan. And we're getting so many immigrants coming here that kids were not even born here. I mean, they were born at another country and they still don't qualify for food stamps. So it was just something that I was just thinking about, that maybe if there was a way that we could change that for having kids having access to food and not just relying just on the school districts or something like that.
I think, yeah, I agree with that. We share a lot of information around summer lunch programs. We know a lot of our families really benefit from those, so we try to get that information out there because a lot of people aren't aware that they're still serving food throughout the summer. But
Yeah.
yeah, difficulty. So we've really tried to make we really tried to remove as many barriers as we can. A lot of our SNAP enrollments we do over the phone, we do virtually, so people don't have to worry about childcare or transport, getting their children to places so they can, get their SNAP recertification done. We really try and minimize those barriers. So, and that's worked well. We implemented that during the beginning of the pandemic, and a lot of people prefer the phone calls because we can schedule them for certain times and they don't have to leave their kids anywhere in the ways that, and also too, when we did our food distribution, you could bring your whole family, and we did different times of the day. We had a morning distribution as well as an afternoon distribution. So if you had to drop children off at school or pick them up or whatever, we had two different times that would hopefully work within family schedules. Work schedules can be difficult. My SNAP enrollment specialist shared that she's done applications as early as 6:30 in the morning and as late as 8 p.m. at night, just to try and fit around people's schedule, because a lot of our community members aren't working typical 9 to 5 jobs. Sometimes they're working night shifts, sometimes they're working in the service, hospitality, or restaurant industry where they have swing shifts and that kind of thing. So it can complicate things, but I mean, I know some of my coworkers will work on the weekend and really try and accommodate and meet families where they're at. As for outreach, in a way, it's really easy to connect with people through family-centered events. So anything going on at the school, if we have a table there at like a back to school event, for example, it's really easy to connect with parents because they're there for their children. So we've had a lot of success that way. I'm trying to think. The public transport also tends to be a pretty big barrier, because one, if you do have children or you have elderly family members that you're trying to get to a SNAP appointment or a food distribution, even though we're located right next to a track station, it's just not always feasible for people. So that lack of a vehicle can make it difficult. Hence why we try and do a lot of virtual. But then you're up against the technology barrier where, someone's
Right.
like, I don't even think I have an email. So our SNAP
Yeah.
specialist is also okay, well, let me help you check if you have an email, and we can go from there and try and see. As well as with unsheltered populations, sometimes that has been a bit of a difficulty. With the food we used to give out in our food distribution, if they had nowhere to cook it, then it really wasn't of use to them. And also, too, same thing. Oh, can you get here to the food distribution? If not, what are we going to do about that? Some of my coworkers at the beginning of the pandemic would go and drive and deliver the food distribution to people, which was really, really out of their role. But it just goes to show, trying to meet people where they are. You have elderly people that are bedridden, you have people with COVID in your home, or you have children that you can't make it. We tried to do that. Of course, it's not always sustainable, but at that time it worked out.
Yeah, and I think that going along with that, Dominique, I think we're also having that issue because community action just doesn't cover Utah County. We cover all of Summit and Wasatch, which is pretty rural up there. And we do have a small pantry. In fact, we just had our van, our community action van, where we can deliver food, because our food pantries up there are they're really small, or it's a closet size, which we are very grateful for our partnership up there. But like you said, for those who want to apply for food stamp, we only have one caseworker up there. And so, yeah, sometimes when phone calls are good for me, emails are great, but when they don't have a phone and when they don't have access to a computer, that can be really difficult. And especially up in Wasatch, because like I said, it's really rural, for them to come to our food bank or to come see a caseworker, that can be very difficult when it comes to transportation. So there is a little bit of barriers with that, but we've tried to make it work, try to make it more flexible. Our caseworker is roaming around with different communities, going to different places. So that kind of does help a little bit.
Yeah, and rural areas can be such a challenge. I'm sure you're facing that a lot more than we are being in Utah County. But yeah, even sometimes we'll have people calling in from Logan or from St. George. They got our name from somewhere, and since our name's in Spanish, they call in, and luckily we've created a little resource list where we can try and help them out or do something virtually. But I can't imagine if someone from Logan had to come in person and then to possibly not even qualify or get denied, and they're 2 hours away from home. So.
I think it's really an ongoing issue, especially it sort of brings me to my next topic. Like, as people are pressed out of Salt Lake County or Utah County, where they might have been initially, to more rural areas, that just introduces the dimension of transportation and access as a problem in a way that it hadn't been before. And speaking of being pressed out into further rural areas, one of the things that we experience just as a recurring theme is housing costs as a pressure that drives food insecurity, that drives the need to access things, and that complicates trying to find resources. So just to give like an example, something like your EBT card when you qualify for SNAP. It has to go somewhere, and not having a stable address
Mhm.
can turn out to be a big hurdle for some people when it comes to actually
Mhm.
like applying, receiving those benefits. And I'm wondering if you guys have a similar experience with housing as an ongoing struggle with the people you work with, and how it might complicate things as you're trying to help people out.
Well, I can't answer with Dominique, but here in Utah County, yeah, we get a lot of people who are homeless. That's mostly all of our population. And when we come to those who don't have a home address, my first question is, do you have someone you trust, or are you living with someone that you want me to forward this? And if they say no, then I refer them to the Food Care Coalition, because that is a another organization here in Provo, pretty close to us, where they accept mails from mails for us to deliver whatever important documentation to this organization, which is awesome. I'm always thankful for them, what they do, because they do help with the homeless population. Now, up in Wasatch, up in Summit County, I don't even know if they have one there, but there are homeless people up there. So I've asked the case manager, and she'll be looking into it to see who's willing to accept mail. I can't imagine. I'm so thankful for the Food Care Coalition for that, because I'm like, we do not accept mails from anybody from Community Action. So I do appreciate the hard work that they have up over there.
I think, yeah, and I think housing is definitely a barrier to, as you mentioned, receiving that EBT card and people not having places to mail things. That's really great that that organization exists and will accept mail,
Oh,
because I don't know of one out here. And yeah, housing. So a lot of our people or clients that come in and they are struggling with food insecurity, they're often struggling with potentially insecure housing situations as well. And there are very few resources for our undocumented families. So TAMF, the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, that's something that uh it can deem you a public charge if you apply for that and you're not a citizen. So we never recommend people applying for that unless they're qualified to do so, which really eliminates a lot of help that could be used, when people are facing foreclosures or evictions or the raising cost of rent. Same thing with, we have some utility assistance programs we refer out to, but they are basically at capacity. Community Action, which helps with some of the how they're at capacity. Like, it is really difficult to find housing assistance. Even we have some families, especially our asylum seeking families, that have come here, shelters are full or they're not accepting, or they have certain TAMF beneficiary requirements that they can't take on some of our families. So it's like 4 families are sharing an apartment. And it's not humane, it's not dignified. But there are so little options. We don't know where to send people. And it's been incredibly difficult since about June of last year to get our asylum seeking population, to get them housed, because if they don't, they got to start their process within the year, and a lot of them aren't given that information, that if they don't start their asylum process within the year, that protection goes away. So trying to balance all of that and get them the legal information they need when they're looking at us like, well, I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight, and I don't know what I'm going to eat. And it's just, and then they submit their applications. It's 8 months or so for a work permit to come in. So what are people supposed to do in that time? And we haven't found government institutions to be really responsive to that. So it's all falling onto the nonprofit sector. And it's just, the situation is not getting any easier, unfortunately. So then we have either people on the street, or we have people that are living in overcrowded living areas. And then we also are dealing with, some people take advantage of that situation and then, oh, I'll rent you a room, but that room's going to cost you $1,000 a month, and taking advantage of people who don't have any other options.
Yeah, I mean, that's something that our caseworkers is also facing too. I mean, I'm not a caseworker, but we do have rental assistance. They're backed up. To see a caseworker, we close at 4, but caseworkers close us at 3. Now that changed. We close at 2 for caseworkers. Why? Because they have to go and look at those cases because they haven't been touched. And even to qualify rental assistance, it just, there are some requirements. So not everyone qualifies for it. One of the things that I do teach is the eviction prevention class, which is a mandatory. And if you're applying for rental assistance here, you have to take our class, which was created by the Utah Coalition in Salt Lake. So that's really great that we have that, because especially for those who are not from here, they don't know their rights, because there have been areas where people abuse the system. And so I'm here and teach that course. And I get so many people say, wow, I didn't know about this. I didn't know about that. I am grateful, because at first they're like, I don't want to take this class, even though it's mandatory, they don't want to take it. But after, they're like, oh, okay, that opens my eyes. So yeah, I mean, we're definitely facing that a lot here too in Utah County, and we don't even have shelters here to begin with. So yeah, most of our clients, they all go to Salt Lake.
So I think we've covered just a lot of detail in the last 30 minutes or so. So I want to start like wrapping up in another direction. I think one of the things about like doing outreach work is that you get the easiest people to reach very quickly, and much of the hardest part of the work is reaching those people who are very hard to reach. And I think this is very much like some of the other things we've talked about. There's no real easy answer to that. But if you guys had like just the unlimited resources and just free reign to pursue that kind of thing, how would you go about trying to reach those difficult to reach people?
I would say definitely more. We had unlimited resources. I think our solution to that would be hiring more people. The more presence we can have, the more one-on-one conversations we can have. Our entire organization, we kind of base our work on the community health worker model, which is people with the lived experience of that community going out into that community and talking to their neighbors or people that have the same shared lived experience, which has proved incredibly effective for us. A lot of actually our SNAP referrals come by word of mouth. So I think just having the capacity to be able to do more outreach, to send more people out, to dedicate the time to really having those one-on-one conversations and finding people and meeting them where they're at, that would help us. However, I mean, I guess difficult to reach populations are different for everyone. I do feel like we're already engaging with the difficult to reach population, immigrants, undocumented folks, and the Latinx community here. But also that's kind of our specialty. There are other groups we'd love to reach, but we don't have like the language capacity to, like our Pacific Islander community or Asian American community. So for us, like other communities are harder to reach. Unsheltered folks have been hard for us, just because of the lack of having a place where we can reliably contact them. So truthfully, we do not end up processing a lot of SNAP applications for people who are unhoused. Every once in a while, we've had like the YWCA send us some people, but that's a population we just unfortunately we haven't had the experience interacting with, that we know needs our services, but it's been difficult to reach them. So yeah, I'd say more staff capacity. I mean, Michelle, you're talking about case managers having to close even earlier because there are so many cases they haven't even touched. I think that we're seeing that in a lot of nonprofits in general, just not having the capacity to meet the demand. But also too, with a lot of post-pandemic funding drying up, we're not in a position to find grants to hire people either. So so the limitation of resources, I think, is what makes it difficult to reach those groups more than anything.
Yeah, I had to think about, that question for a minute. I mean, yes, the funding and hiring more people, of course, because we just lost a caseworker because she left to go back home in Nevada because she finished school, which is awesome for her, but we're short staffed 100%. especially Spanish speakers. That's what we need the most here, even though we only have 3 Spanish speakers. We asked to have more, but technically it's 2. One of them is learning Spanish up in Heber. She doesn't know Spanish, but she's learning it. So she has to learn in order to reach the Hispanic population. But I think for me is definitely have been with the Latino community, just because I think it's the immigration that is just, it's heartbreaking. Like, they just arrived, they don't qualify for food stamps, and then I think that is what I'm seeing the most here, is seeing that. And I'm a little hesitant to give them that hope. It's like, yes, we have this program, but there are some requirements. And that's why I always refer them to our food bank, even if they don't qualify for it. I think for me, that has always definitely been with the Latino community and the qualifications. I have met other people who speak like a whole different language that I have no idea. So for me, it's just like phone and translation. So I mean, if we have like a cool tool or a cool system where we can communicate, that'll be awesome. Or having able to have someone who can help translate, to help nonprofits like have a funding for that too, because that'll be awesome for us. So there's no miscommunication. I think that's something that, and a coalition here that we talked about, that I'm part of, we talk a lot about that language barrier, not just with the Hispanic, but we're getting more other languages that we're like, whoa, I didn't know we need this, especially people from Ukraine. We have a lot of people from Ukraine, and we do not have no one here who speaks that language. So yeah, I think just like you said, having that funding, maybe having for nonprofits, having someone that we can contact to help translate, that would be awesome as well.
I second that. I think the translation, there are more people here speaking more than Spanish and English. Even we encountered a family that both the parent, well, we're trying to connect them to resources. They're actually not one of our clients yet, but they speak Venezuelan Sign Language. And it's like, geez,
that's
they all
so
speak
different.
Spanish. Yeah, it's so different. So we're like, where do we go for that? But I want to echo too what you say about our asylum seekers. They're looking for assistance, but they're not eligible for benefits yet, and it's hard to explain that. But then we've had certain cases where we think there's a lot of misinformation floating around, like the communities of people coming because they're like, well, I was told by someone else that I can access these benefits, and we have to explain to them,
Oh yeah,
with your current status, you can't. And then we've had a couple of families come to us and we're like, oh, well, they got benefits from this state. And we're like, well, that shouldn't be possible. So
exactly.
that.
Every state has their own policy, apparently. I think it's all politics, because I've heard that too. It's like, well, my friend from New York got it. I'm like, how is that possible?
Exactly. Yeah. It's because and then we're worried, we worry and we wonder, like, we don't, there's a lot of fraudulent activity, people are getting
That's
taken
true.
advantage of, and we don't want people to be victims of fraud, and that, or that they've received these benefits and then it's going to count against them when they're in their asylum process.
Right.
So we try to keep an eye on it, but it can be scary.
It can be, yes. I've seen that too.
I think there's a real temptation when you have a conversation like this to close out on like a positive note, because it's like a nice bow on the conversation. And I'd like to like give that a shot, but at the same time, like, this has been a really great conversation that highlighted issues that are very pressing and depressing. So I don't know that it's quite appropriate to like put a total smile on it. But I do want to thank you both for like going in depth like this. This has been a terrific conversation. And I think a lot of this, a lot of this is going to come as very familiar to people working in the same space. I know I've heard a lot of similar things from other people working in the community. And I think it's very important for people who are interested but not as familiar to hear this stuff, because like I said, it's prevalent. It's very, very much a fabric of the work that you guys do. And thanks so much for doing it. I think before we sign off, though, I want to give you guys a chance to plug any programs or events that you might have coming up. It's all right if you don't, but I figure I'd give you a second.
Yes, I have to look it up. We every year, Community Action, they have a Summit Poverty, which is September. I have to look it up. Give me a minute. I think it's September 7th. Um, that one we have annually, which is pretty awesome. But if you know anyone who lives in Utah County, we also have a diaper bank, which is a really awesome resource. So we got a grant through the state of Utah. They're doing a research study and they chose us to do this. And one of the qualification, almost everyone qualifies, but one of them is food stamps. So if they have food stamp, TANF, Medicaid, or we also look at their income, they do qualify for a program where we give them 50 diapers per child, which is awesome because we do have donations, but they're not like 50. It's like whatever they give us, that's what we give to them. So that's a really awesome. And we just got pull-ups. So that's another great thing is it's part of the research study. So if they're interested in the pull-ups, which is more for like teaching their children like how to potty, we will give them 44 a month. And it is a commitment. So that is one of the, I always tell when I'm out in the community, we have diapers come to our food bank. You will qualify for this. Mostly everyone does. So that is one of the things that we do have. And I think that's all.
Okay, and I guess I'll plug in a few different things here. So August 24th, 4 p.m. to 10 p.m., we'll be having a community market here at Comunidades Unidas, just to be together in community and support some small local Latinx-owned businesses. And then September, October, date to be determined, we'll have our annual health fair, where we'll be inviting community partners out to give resources to the community, and we also do some vaccines. We're probably going to do COVID and the flu. And we're going to be distributing jackets as well, among other things. So that's always a great event to get the community out. And then I guess my final plug is just to anyone watching this. As you can see, these issues exist here in Salt Lake County, across Utah County, and the rest of rural Utah. And I think it's essential that we come together and we engage in advocacy, because it can't just be one handful of really mission aligned organizations going up to Capitol Hill and doing it. We all need to come together around our common interest for the well-beings of Utah, and engage in those difficult conversations, and engage our representatives and try and advocate on behalf of our communities. But we got to do it together. So that's I guess my plug at the end here.
Thanks so much. For my part, I'm going to say keep an eye out for future issue forums from Utahns Against Hunger. We should be releasing one towards the end of August. And for everybody watching, thanks for joining us.